Most women scream. Most women cry. When Morgan handed Alicia the divorce papers throwing 5 years of marriage into the trash for a woman 10 years younger, he expected a war. He had his lawyers ready. He had his assets hidden. He was prepared for the ugliest battle of his life. But Alicia didn't scream. She didn't even look up from her coffee. She just picked up a pen, signed the document without reading a single clause, and slid it back across the marble table. Morgan thought he had won. He thought she was weak. He had no idea that by signing those papers she wasn't losing a husband, she was unleashing a titan. And when he saw her again 3 months later, she wasn't the crying ex-wife he expected. She was the one woman in the room he couldn't afford to talk to. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was louder than a gunshot in the silent kitchen. Morgan Sterling sat across from his wife Alicia, his heart hammering against his ribs not from guilt but from adrenaline. He was the VP of Sterling & Co., a man used to hostile takeovers and boardroom brawls. He had spent the last 3 weeks rehearsing this moment in the mirror. He had prepared arguments for every accusation she would throw at him. He was ready for her to bring up his late nights. He was ready for her to mention the receipts from the Ritz-Carlton found in his jacket pocket. He was ready for the tears, the breaking of plates, the begging. "I'm leaving Alicia," he had said, his voice practiced and cold. "I've met someone else. Someone who understands the direction my life is going. Someone who fits my future, not my past." He waited. Alicia Vance, a woman who had spent the last 5 years folding his laundry, hosting his dull dinner parties, and managing his schedule, simply took a sip of her black coffee. She was wearing an oversized beige cardigan, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked nothing like Chloe, the vibrant 23-year-old marketing intern waiting for Morgan in the Audi outside. Alicia set the mug down. "Okay," she said. Morgan blinked, his brow furrowing. "Okay, did you hear me? I said I want a divorce." "I heard you, Morgan," Alicia said, her voice terrifyingly even. "Do you have the papers?" Morgan fumbled with his leather briefcase, his confidence faltering for a split second. This wasn't the script. Yes. My attorney James Rotherham drafted these. Now I want to be fair, but you need to understand that the prenup is ironclad. You get the Honda. The apartment lease is in my name, so you'll have 30 days to vacate and—" Alicia reached out her hand. "Give them to me." He slid the thick packet across the granite island. He watched her eyes. They weren't red, they weren't glassy. They were opaque like a shuttered window. She didn't flip to the section on alimony. She didn't check the division of assets. She flipped to the last page, found the line marked respondent, and uncapped a cheap ballpoint pen. Scritch. Scratch. She signed Alicia Vance, not Alicia Sterling. She had already dropped his name. "Alicia, wait," Morgan said, a sudden wave of unease washing over him. "You haven't even read it. You're waiving your right to contest the alimony. You're walking away with almost nothing." She looked up then, and for the first time Morgan saw something in her eyes that chilled him. It wasn't sadness. It was boredom. "I don't want your money, Morgan," she said softly. "And I certainly don't want to fight for a man who doesn't want to be here. You're free." She stood up, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. "Is there anything else, because I have a busy afternoon?" Morgan sat frozen. The victory he had craved felt hollow. He wanted her to fight for him. He wanted proof that he was a prize worth losing. Her indifference made him feel small. "Fine," Morgan snapped, snatching the papers back. "If you want to be an idiot and starve, that's your problem. Chloe is waiting for me." "Tell her I said good luck," Alicia replied, her back turned to him. Morgan stormed out of the house, slamming the heavy oak door behind him. He marched down the driveway to his silver Audi R8, where Chloe was checking her makeup in the visor mirror. "Well?" Chloe asked, popping her gum. "Was it a nightmare? Did she scream?" Morgan threw the papers into the back seat. She signed. No contest. Chloe squealed, clapping her hands. "Oh my God, Morgan. That's amazing. We're free. We can book the Aspen trip without worrying about court dates." Morgan started the engine, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He looked back at the house one last time. The curtains didn't move. No one was watching him leave. "Yeah," Morgan muttered, pulling out onto the street. "Amazing." But as he drove away, the unease in his gut grew. Elysia had been a graphic designer when they met, making modest money. She had quit to support his career. She had no savings that he knew of, no family in the city. By signing those papers, she had effectively made herself homeless. Why wasn't she scared? 3 months passed. Life for Morgan Sterling was on paper perfect. With Elysia out of the picture, he had fully integrated Chloe into his life. They were the it couple of his social circle. Chloe was young, loud, and loved to spend Morgan's money on things that showed off his status tables at Dorsia weekends and the Hamptons' front row seats at Knicks games. But the perfection was exhausting. Chloe wasn't like Elysia. Chloe didn't organize his life. She consumed it. The house was always a mess of shopping bags. She forgot to write down his meetings. She complained when he worked late. And strangely, Elysia had vanished off the face of the earth. Morgan had expected her to call. He expected a drunken voicemail begging for money, or at least a text asking about mail she'd left behind. But there was nothing. Her phone number was disconnected. Her social media accounts, which she rarely used anyway, were deactivated. He drove by the old apartment complex she used to like, thinking he might see her old Honda, but she wasn't there. It was as if Elysia Vance had never existed. "Stop obsessing over her," Chloe snapped one evening over dinner at Le Bernardin. "She's probably living in a trailer in Ohio with her parents. She's a loser, Morgan. That's why you left her." "I'm not obsessing," Morgan lied, taking a sip of wine. "I just find it odd. She didn't take the alimony. That's $50,000 she left on the table. Who does that?" "Someone who knows they aren't worth it." Chloe laughed. Morgan forced a smile, but his attention was caught by a conversation at the table next to them. 2 men in bespoke Italian suits were speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Morgan recognized one of them, David Geffen, a massive player in the tech investment sphere. "Have you seen the projections for Valkyrie?" the first man whispered. "The IPO is rumored to be in the billions. It's going to shatter the tech sector." "I heard the CEO is a ghost," the second man replied. "Total recluse. Operates under a pseudonym. They say the proprietary algorithm was written by a single person in a basement over 5 years. Morgan's ears pricked up. Valkyrie Systems. It was the buzz of Wall Street. A new AI-driven logistics software that was rendering traditional shipping models obsolete. Everyone wanted a piece of it, but the company was notoriously private. "I'd kill to get an invite to the Gatsby Gala next week," the first man continued. "Rumor has it the founder of Valkyrie is finally going to make a public appearance. It's the event of the decade. The ticket alone is $50,000. Morgan looked down at his plate. The Gatsby Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the most exclusive charity event in New York. If he could get in there, if he could shake hands with the people behind Valkyrie, he could secure his position at Sterling & Company for life. He could finally step out of the shadow of his father-in-law, well, ex-father-in-law, who had founded the firm. "Chloe," Morgan said suddenly, "we need to go to the Gatsby Gala." Chloe's eyes lit up. "The Met? Oh my God, yes, I saw the dress code online. It's Gilded Age glamour. I need a dress from Vera Wang. Can we afford the tickets?" "I'll pull some strings," Morgan said, his ambition overriding his financial caution. "I know a guy on the board. It'll cost us, but it's an investment." The next week was a blur of favors and wire transfers. Morgan spent nearly $40,000 securing 2 tickets through a back-channel broker. It was a reckless amount of money dipping into the savings he had protected during the divorce, but he told himself it was necessary. He needed a win. His numbers at work were slipping because he was too distracted by Chloe's constant demands. The night of the gala arrived. The air was crisp and the steps of the Met were covered in a red carpet that seemed to stretch for miles. Paparazzi flashed blinding lights as celebrities and titans of industry ascended the stairs. Morgan stepped out of his limo, adjusting his bow tie. Chloe was on his arm wearing a dress that was perhaps a little too revealing for the somber elegance of the event, but she looked stunning. Morgan puffed out his chest. This was where he belonged. They moved through the great hall, sipping champagne. Morgan scanned the room, looking for targets. He saw Elon Musk talking to a Saudi prince. He saw the CEO of Goldman Sachs. "This is it, babe," Chloe whispered, clutching his arm. "We made it." Morgan Sterling," a voice called out from behind him. Morgan turned to see Adrian Pendleton, an old rival from college who now worked at a hedge fund. "Adrian," Morgan nodded. "Good to see you." "Surprised to see you here," Adrian said with a smirk. "I heard Sterling and Comey had a rough quarter, but hey, I guess the alimony payments are low, right? Heard the ex-wife rolled over." Morgan stiffened. Alicia wasn't the issue, and yes, the divorce was amicable. "Lucky you," Adrian laughed. "My divorce cost me a yacht. Anyway, are you here for the Valkyrie reveal?" Everyone is placing bets on who it is. Some say it's a kid from MIT. Others say it's a collective of ex-Google engineers. "I'm here to make a deal," Morgan said smoothly. Suddenly the lights in the massive hall dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd of billionaires and socialites. A spotlight hit the stage at the Temple of Dender. The host, a famous CNN anchor, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generosity tonight. But I know why you are all here. For the past year, the business world has been asking one question. Who is the mind behind Valkyrie Systems? Who wrote the code that is currently valued at $3 billion? Morgan leaned forward, his heart racing. This was it. "Tonight," the host continued, "we are honored to finally introduce the founder and CEO, a woman who built her empire in silence while the world underestimated her. Please welcome the Phantom of Fifth Avenue." The heavy velvet curtains parted. Morgan squinted. A silhouette stepped forward into the spotlight. It was a woman. She was wearing a gown made of midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer like liquid starlight. It was elegant, regal, and cost more than Morgan's car. Her hair was styled in sleek Hollywood waves, diamonds dripping from her ears. She stepped up to the mic, her face illuminated by the harsh white light. Morgan dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the stone floor, the sound echoing, but he didn't hear it. He couldn't breathe. His knees buckled and he had to grab Chloe's shoulder to stay upright. "What?" Chloe hissed. "Morgan, what is it? Who is she?" Morgan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stared at the woman on stage, the billionaire, the genius, the most powerful person in the room. It was Alicia. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't polite clapping. It was a roar, a physical wave of sound that shook the Temple of Dender. But Morgan Sterling couldn't hear it. The blood rushing in his ears sounded like a freight train. "Morgan," Chloe hissed, digging her fake nails into his bicep. "Morgan, you're making a scene. Why are you staring at her like that? Do you know her?" Morgan couldn't tear his eyes away from the stage. The woman standing there commanded the room with a terrifying grace. She waited for the applause to die down, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. Lips painted a deep velvety crimson that Morgan had never seen on her before. That's Alicia." Morgan choked out his voice, barely a whisper. Chloe froze. She squinted at the stage, then looked back at Morgan, her face twisting in confusion and disgust. The ex-wife, the frumpy housewife who signed the papers in a cardigan. That woman. "Yes," Morgan breathed. "You're lying." Chloe scoffed, though her voice wavered. "That woman is wearing a vintage Schiaparelli gown. That necklace is Cartier. She looks like royalty." On stage, Alicia leaned into the microphone. Her voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, was smooth, low, and confident. It was the voice Morgan had heard every day for 5 years, but stripped of the timidity, the deference. "Thank you," Elysia said. "For a long time I was told that my value lay in my ability to support others. I was told that my place was in the background, that silence was my duty." Morgan felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Was she talking about him? But silence, Elysia continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, is where you hear the things others miss. While the world was busy shouting, busy posturing, busy selling. She paused, and for a terrifying second, Morgan felt her gaze linger on the dark corner where he stood. I was building. Valkyrie wasn't created in a boardroom. It was created at a kitchen table late at night in the quiet hours when no one was watching, when no one cared to look. The crowd murmured in appreciation of her humility. Morgan felt like vomiting. The kitchen table, the granite island where he had tossed his keys every night, ignoring her while he checked his emails. She had been sitting there, working. They call Valkyrie a logistics miracle, Elysia said, her voice strengthening. But it's really just a system for cutting out the dead weight, for identifying what is essential and discarding what is merely noise. I learned that lesson the hard way. But once I cut the noise from my own life, I became limitless. The room erupted again. Oh my God, Chloe whispered, stepping away from Morgan as if he were contagious. She's talking about you. She's calling you the dead weight. Morgan felt a tap on his shoulder. He spun around, jumpy. It was Adrian Pendleton again, grinning like a shark. Morgan, you sly dog. Adrian beamed, clapping him on the back. Why didn't you tell us? You kept the creator of Valkyrie secret for 5 years. That's the greatest play I've ever seen. You must be heavily invested. No wonder you didn't contest the divorce. You probably have stock options coming out of your ears. Morgan's stomach dropped. Stock options. He had nothing. He had the prenup that he had insisted on, the prenup that kept their assets strictly separate. If Elysia had built this company during their marriage and he had legally separated his finances from hers to protect himself, he had also legally separated himself from her billions. I need a drink, Morgan stammered. He stumbled toward the bar, Chloe trailing behind him, looking furious. He ordered a double Scotch neat and downed it in one gulp. His mind was racing. How Elysia didn't know how to code. She was a graphic designer. She made logos for bakeries. She didn't build AI algorithms. This had to be a mistake. Maybe she was just the face of the company, a figurehead. He turned back to the room. Elysia had descended from the stage and was immediately swarmed. But not by fans, by titans. Morgan watched in horror as Tim Cook shook her hand. He saw the head of the Sequoia Capital Fund leaning in close, laughing at something she said. She wasn't just a guest. She was the sun everyone was orbiting. I need to talk to her, Morgan said, a desperate plan forming in his head. She's my wife. I mean my ex-wife. We have a history. If I can just talk to her, remind her of the good times. You're pathetic, Chloe spat. She just humiliated you in front of the entire Forbes 500 list, and you think you can charm her? She hates you, Morgan. She doesn't hate me, Morgan insisted, adjusting his tie, though his hands were shaking. She loved me. She signed those papers because she was hurt. This is a cry for attention. She's doing this to show me what I'm missing. Morgan pushed through the crowd. He was a tall man, used to parting seas of people, but tonight the crowd was dense with security and sycophants. He elbowed a senator out of the way, ignored a glare from a famous actress, and finally reached the edge of the velvet rope guarding the VIP circle. A massive man in a black suit blocked his path. Private reception, sir. I know her, Morgan snapped, pointing at Elysia, who was standing 20 feet away, sipping champagne with a man who looked like a European duke. I'm her husband, ex-husband, Morgan Sterling. The guard looked at a clipboard, then back at Morgan. His expression didn't change. Name's not on the list, Mr. Sterling. Tell her I'm here. Morgan shouted, his voice cracking. He saw heads turn. People were staring. Alesia! Alesia! Alesia paused. She slowly turned her head. Her eyes locked onto Morgan's. There was no surprise in them, no anger, just that same chilling boredom he had seen in the kitchen 3 months ago. She said something to the guard, a quick, subtle nod. The guard stepped aside. "She'll see you," the guard grunted. Morgan straightened his jacket. He turned to give Chloe a smug look, but Chloe was already gone, disappearing into the crowd, likely distancing herself from the sinking ship. Morgan walked into the circle. Up close, Alesia looked even more expensive. Her skin glowed. She smelled of jasmine and money. "Hello, Morgan," she said. Her tone was polite, distant, like she was greeting a waiter she vaguely remembered. "Alesia," Morgan said, putting on his best boardroom smile. "You look incredible. I had no idea you were working on something like this. Why didn't you tell me we were partners?" Alesia raised an eyebrow. "Partners, Morgan. For the last 3 years of our marriage, you didn't even know the password to my laptop. You never asked what I was doing." "I was busy," Morgan pleaded. "I was building Sterling and Cody for us. But look, this is amazing. Valkyrie. It's huge. And I was thinking, we rushed things. The divorce papers. Maybe we were too hasty. We have a connection, Alesia. You can't deny that." The Duke, standing next to her, chuckled softly and walked away, giving them space. Alesia took a step closer to Morgan. She looked up at him, and for a second he thought he saw warmth. He thought he had her. "You're right, Morgan. We did have a connection," she said softly. "You provided the one thing I needed most to build Valkyrie." Morgan smiled, relief washing over him. "Support, stability." "Neglect," Alesia said. Morgan's smile froze. "If you had been a better husband, Morgan, I never would have finished the code," she said, her voice calm and deadly. "If you had come home on time, if you had wanted to talk to me, if you had taken me on dates, I would have been distracted, but you gave me the gift of solitude. You ignored me so thoroughly that I had thousands of hours to perfect the algorithm. You made me feel so invisible that I learned how to disappear and work in the shadows." She took a sip of her champagne. "So thank you. You were the perfect catalyst. But now that the work is done, I don't need the catalyst anymore." "Alesia, you can't be serious," Morgan hissed, realizing people were listening. "I'm your husband. I have rights. That company was built while we were married. I'm entitled to you." "You're entitled to nothing," she cut him off. "Check the prenup, Morgan. All assets created, acquired, or developed independently by either party remain the sole property of said party. You had your lawyer add that clause because you thought I'd go after your family trust. You thought you were protecting your millions." She leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "Instead, you protected my billions." She pulled back, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the Secretary of Defense. Enjoy the gala, Morgan. I heard the shrimp is excellent." She turned on her heel and walked away. 2 security guards immediately stepped in front of Morgan, forming a wall of black wool. Morgan stood there alone in the center of the most exclusive party in New York, realizing that he was the poorest man in the room. The morning after the gala, Morgan didn't go to work. He couldn't. His face was plastered across page 6, but not in the way he had always dreamed. The headline read, "The Billionaire and the Ex-Tech Queen Alesia Vance Stuns at Met Gala, while ex-husband Morgan Sterling watches from the sidelines." There was a photo of him shouting at the security guard, his face red and distorted, looking desperate. Next to it was a photo of Alesia, serene and glowing, shaking hands with the president. Morgan sat in his penthouse, the apartment that suddenly felt very small and very mortgaged. Chloe had not come home last night. She had sent a text at 3:00 a.m. "I'm staying at a friend's. I need space to think." He knew what that meant. Chloe was gone. She had sniffed out the scent of failure on him like a bloodhound. Morgan threw his phone across the room. It cracked against the wall. He needed to understand. He needed to know how. He went to his study and booted up his laptop. He frantically searched for Valkyrie systems. He dug through Wired articles, TechCrunch interviews, anything he could find. He found an interview Elysia had given to the Wall Street Journal that morning. He clicked the video. Elysia was sitting in a sunlit studio wearing a white blazer. She looked powerful, relaxed. Interviewer: Elysia, the world is shocked. You were a graphic designer. How did you make the leap to advanced AI logistics? Elysia: I didn't make a leap. I made a pivot. My background in design taught me about patterns, visual flow, efficiency. I started noticing that global shipping logistics were messy. They lacked symmetry. I started coding as a hobby just to see if I could visualize the data better. I taught myself Python and C++ at night. Interviewer: At night you were married then, weren't you? Elysia, smiling politely: Yes, my husband worked very late hours. I found myself with a lot of free time. I didn't like watching TV. So I learned. I built a simulation. Then I fed it real-world data. When the simulation predicted the supply chain collapse of 2023 6 months before it happened, I knew I had something. Morgan paused the video. 2023. He remembered that year. He had spent that entire year stressing about the market crash, yelling at Elysia because his portfolio was down. Meanwhile, she had been sitting in the guest room predicting the crash he was losing money on. He remembered one night specifically. He had come home drunk after a client dinner, which was actually drinks with a paralegal. Elysia had come downstairs, her eyes bright, holding a notebook. Morgan, look at this, she had said. I think I found a way to optimize shipping routes using a fractal algorithm. It's really interesting. Not now, Elysia, he had snapped, loosening his tie. I've been dealing with real business all day. I don't want to look at your little puzzles. She had closed the notebook. Okay, she had whispered. I won't bother you with it again. Morgan put his head in his hands. He groaned a deep guttural sound of regret. She had tried to show him. She had tried to bring him in. And he had dismissed a billion-dollar idea as a little puzzle. The intercom buzzed. Morgan ignored it. It buzzed again, long and insistent. He walked to the wall panel and pressed the button. What? Mr. Sterling? The doorman's voice was nervous. There are quite a few people down here to see you. Reporters. And a process server. A process server. Morgan frowned. For what? I don't know, sir. But there's also a delivery. A large crate. It's marked personal effects. From Vance Industries. Morgan's heart skipped a beat. A crate? Send the crate up. Keep the reporters out. 10 minutes later, 2 movers wheeled a wooden crate into his living room. They left and Morgan stood alone with the box. It had a crowbar attached to the side. He pried it open. Inside, packed in packing peanuts, were things from their old house. Things he hadn't even realized were missing. A framed photo of them from their honeymoon in Bali. His old college sweatshirt she used to wear. A ceramic mug she had made in a pottery class that said "World's Okayest Husband." And on top of it all, a letter. On thick, cream-colored stationery. Morgan picked it up. His hands shook. Morgan, I'm clearing out my storage. I realized I don't need to hold on to the past anymore. You can have these memories. They belong to a version of me that doesn't exist now. Also, I saw the news about Sterling and Company struggling with the new Asian market regulations. It's a shame. If you had asked, I could have told you that Valkyrie's data predicted that shift 2 years ago. But then again, you never really liked listening to me. I've purchased the building your office is in. Don't worry, I won't evict you. I'm raising the rent to market value, though. It's only fair. Business is business, right? E. Morgan dropped the letter. She had bought his building. She was his landlord. He walked to the window and looked out at the New York skyline. Somewhere out there in a penthouse far higher and far more luxurious than his Elysia was sipping coffee looking at the city she now owned a piece of. He had wanted a trophy wife. He had wanted someone who looked good on his arm and didn't challenge him. He realized now with a crushing weight that he had been married to a dragon. And he was the idiot who had poked her until she woke up. The phone rang. It was his boss, the CEO of Sterling & Co. "Morgan," the CEO barked. "Why is the rent on our headquarters going up by 400% next month? Who is this new landlord group, Vance Holdings? Fix this or you're out." Morgan stared at the phone. He couldn't fix it. He couldn't fix anything. The collapse of Morgan Sterling's life didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing slide like a car losing its brakes on an icy hill. It started with the rent. The morning after the crate arrived, Morgan walked into the Sterling & Company boardroom. The atmosphere was toxic. The CEO, Adrian Sterling, Morgan's uncle, which was the only reason Morgan had survived this long, was purple with rage. 400%! Adrian slammed his fist on the mahogany table. "They want a 400% increase. We've been in this building since 1985. This Vance Holdings is trying to bleed us dry." Morgan stared at his hands. He knew exactly why the rent was going up. It wasn't market value. It was a tax on his infidelity. "I can fix this," Morgan said, his voice trembling slightly. "I know the owner. I can talk to her." "You know the owner?" Adrian squinted at him. "You mean the ex-wife? The one you dumped for that Instagram model? The one who is currently on the cover of Time magazine being hailed as the Oracle of AI. "Yes," Morgan said. "I'll handle it." Morgan spent the next 3 days calling Elysia's office. He called her personal line. He called her assistant. He even tried emailing her old Gmail address. Every call was met with a polite robotic receptionist. "Ms. Vance is currently unavailable. If this is regarding a tenancy matter, please contact our legal department." On the 4th day, Morgan came home early, defeated to find his penthouse eerily quiet. The closets were open. Chloe's clothes were gone. But she hadn't just taken her clothes. She had taken the espresso machine, the Dyson vacuum, and the signed Warhol print Morgan had bought at auction. On the kitchen counter, the same granite island where Elysia had signed the divorce papers, was a note written in purple Sharpie. "Morgan, I can't do this. The bad press is ruining my brand partnerships. Fashion Nova dropped me because people are calling you a fumble in my comments. I'm going to Dubai with Adrian Pendleton. He bought me a G-Wagon. Don't call me." Chloe Morgan crumbled the note. Adrian Pendleton, the guy from the gala, the guy who had mocked him. The next morning, Morgan walked into work hungover, wearing a wrinkled shirt. Security stopped him at the turnstile. "ID won't scan Mr. Sterling," the guard said, avoiding eye contact. "It's a glitch," Morgan snapped. "Let me in." "It's not a glitch, Morgan." Morgan turned to see his uncle standing in the lobby, flanked by 2 HR representatives. "Uncle Adrian." "The board voted last night," Adrian said coldly. "We're relocating the headquarters to New Jersey to avoid the rent hike. And as for you, you've become a liability. The clients don't trust a man who throws away $1 billion asset like Elysia Vance. It shows poor judgment. Extremely poor judgment." "You're firing me," Morgan gasped. "I'm family." "You're a fool," Adrian said. "Hand over your badge. Your severance is in the mail." Morgan stood on the sidewalk of 5th Avenue holding a cardboard box containing a stapler and a dead succulent. It was raining. He had no job, no wife, no girlfriend. And thanks to his lavish spending on Chloe, his liquid cash was running dangerously low. He checked his bank account on his phone. $12,000. That wouldn't even cover the mortgage on the penthouse for another month. Rage began to boil in his chest. This wasn't fair. Elysia had played him. She had hidden her success, hidden her money. That had to be illegal. They were married when she wrote that code. That meant half of Valkyrie belonged to him. He didn't need to beg her. He needed to sue her. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number of a lawyer he saw on late-night TV commercials, a man named Saul Berkowitz, known as the Pit Bull of Wall Street. Berkowitz, the voice answered on the first ring. I want to sue Elysia Vance, Morgan said, staring up at the rain. I want half of everything. There was a pause on the line, then a low, greedy chuckle. Come to my office, Mr. Sterling. Let's go hunting. The conference room at Vance Industries was located on the 90th floor. It was all glass overlooking the city like a god's observatory. Morgan sat on one side of the long table flanked by Saul Berkowitz. Saul was wearing a cheap suit that smelled of stale tobacco. He looked out of place in the pristine high-tech office. Opposite them sat Elysia. She looked bored. She was typing on a tablet, barely acknowledging their presence. Next to her was her lawyer, Marcus Thorne, a man so legendary in New York legal circles that he was rumored to have drafted the devil's own contracts. Mr. Sterling, Marcus Thorne began, his voice smooth as velvet. This lawsuit is frivolous. You signed a prenuptial agreement. You waived all rights to independent intellectual property. We are here as a courtesy to give you one chance to withdraw before we countersue for legal fees which will bankrupt you. We're not withdrawing. Saul slammed a fist on the table. My client supported Ms. Vance for 5 years. He paid the mortgage. He paid for the food that fueled her brain while she wrote that code that constitutes an investment. Under the doctrine of equitable distribution, he is entitled to a share of the fruits of that labor. Elysia finally looked up. She took off her reading glasses. Supported me. She repeated, a wry smile playing on her lips. Is that how you remember it, Morgan? I paid the bills, Elysia, Morgan said, finding his courage. You quit your job. You sat at home. I worked 80-hour weeks to keep a roof over your head. You couldn't have built Valkyrie if you were working a 9-to-5. I bought you the time. You bought me time, Elysia mused. That's an interesting perspective. She tapped her tablet. A holographic screen projected onto the center of the table. It displayed a complex timeline of data logs. Do you know what Valkyrie actually does, Morgan? Elysia asked. It's logistics, Morgan scoffed. Shipping routes, trucks. That's the public application, Elysia corrected. But the core engine, the heart of the code. It's a pattern recognition system designed to identify anomalies. It finds mistakes. It finds leaks. It finds fraud. Morgan frowned. What does that have to do with me? I started writing the code 4 years ago, Elysia said, standing up and walking slowly around the table. Because I was bored, yes, but also because I was worried. You were coming home stressed. You were muttering about lost accounts and rounding errors in the Asian markets. She pressed a button. The hologram changed. It showed bank statements. Sterling & Company internal ledgers. Morgan's face went pale. These are your trades, Morgan. From 2022 to 2024, Elysia said softly. You were sloppy. You were moving money from client escrow accounts to cover your own bad bets on crypto. It wasn't just negligence. It was embezzlement. Federal prison time, 20 years minimum. Saul Berkowitz looked at Morgan. Is this true? Morgan couldn't speak. He felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He had done it just a few times, he told himself. Just to cover some losses. He intended to put it back. I was going to fix it, Morgan whispered. You didn't fix it, Elysia said. I did. She leaned over the table, her eyes locking onto his. I used the early version of Valkyrie to penetrate Sterling & Company's servers. I didn't steal money, Morgan. I rearranged it. My algorithm balanced your books in real-time micro-trading in the milliseconds between transactions to generate enough profit to fill the holes you dug. I spent 3 years quietly patching your crimes from our kitchen table. Morgan stared at her in horror. You knew. I saved you, Elysia said. Every day. While you were out having dinner with Chloe, while you were buying expensive watches, my code was working in the background, keeping the SEC from knocking on our door. I wasn't just building a company, Morgan. I was keeping you out of jail. The room was deadly silent. Even Saul Berkowitz looked terrified. "I did it because I loved you," Alicia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I thought you were just stressed. I thought if I fixed the problem, the man I married would come back. But he never did." She turned to Marcus Thorne. "Show him the file." Marcus slid a thick red folder across the table. "This folder," Alicia said, "contains the unedited logs. It proves exactly what you did and exactly how I fixed it. If you proceed with this lawsuit, Morgan, if you try to claim ownership of my code, you are legally claiming ownership of the mechanism that hid your embezzlement. I will be forced to release these logs into discovery, and the FBI will be very interested to see them." She sat back down and crossed her legs. "So here is the deal. You will drop the lawsuit. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement stating you never had anything to do with Valkyrie, and in exchange I will keep this folder in my private vault. You stay free, but you walk away with nothing." Morgan looked at the red folder. It was a loaded gun pointed right at his head. He realized then the true magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just divorced a wife. He had divorced his guardian angel. He had thrown away the only person in the world who had the intelligence to save him from himself. Morgan's voice cracked. "I'll sign." "Good choice," Saul Berkowitz said, snapping his briefcase shut and standing up. "I'm dropping you as a client, Mr. Sterling. Good luck paying my bill." Saul stormed out. Morgan took the pen Marcus offered. He signed the withdrawal papers. He signed the NDA. When he was done, he looked up at Alicia one last time. She was already looking at her tablet again, her face illuminated by the blue light of the empire she built. "Alicia," he whispered. "Goodbye, Morgan," she said, without looking up. Security escorted him out. Morgan walked out of the skyscraper and back onto the street. The rain had stopped, but the city felt colder than ever. He looked up at the towering glass building. He was safe from prison, yes, but he was 40 years old, unemployed, broke, and blacklisted. He walked to a subway station. He couldn't afford a cab anymore. As he waited for the train, he saw a digital billboard flash on the tunnel wall. It was an ad for Valkyrie Systems. The tagline read, "See what others miss." Morgan closed his eyes and leaned his head against the dirty tile wall. The train approached, the screech of the brakes sounding like a scream. He had missed everything. 2 years passed. In the high-speed world of New York finance, 2 years is a lifetime. It is enough time for empires to rise, for scandals to be forgotten, and for men like Morgan Sterling to become ghosts. Morgan no longer lived in a penthouse. He lived in a basement studio in Queens with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. His Audi R8 was long gone, repossessed to pay off debts that Saul Berkowitz had failed to shield him from. He didn't work on Wall Street anymore. The blacklist was effective. No firm would touch the man who had embezzled from his own family and then tried to sue the most popular female CEO in America. Morgan now worked as a night shift dispatcher for a trucking company in New Jersey. The irony was a bitter pill he had to swallow every single night. He spent his hours staring at screens, tracking trucks, ensuring deliveries were made on time. He was doing manually what Alicia's software Valkyrie did automatically in milliseconds. Every night at the depot, the drivers would sit around drinking bad coffee, talking about the news. And every night it seemed Alicia's name was in the air. "Did you see Vance Industries bought out that German robotics firm?" one driver asked, flipping through a newspaper. "She's unstoppable. They say she's going to run for Senate soon." "She's a genius," another driver nodded. "And look at her. She looks happier than ever. I heard she just got engaged to that French architect." Morgan sat in the corner, his cap pulled down low over his eyes. He didn't say a word. He just stared at his monitor, watching the blinking dots of the trucks moving across the map. He had tried to move on. He had tried to date. But every woman he met seemed dim compared to Alicia. They talked about trivial things. They didn't have that quiet intensity, that hidden depth that he had once mistaken for boredom. He realized too late that Elysia's silence wasn't emptiness. It was a reservoir, and he was dying of thirst. One rainy Tuesday in November, the depot manager called Morgan into his office. "Sterling," the manager grunted, chewing on a cigar. "We got a priority job. A special courier run into the city. My usual guy called in sick. You have a clean driving record. You want the overtime?" "Sure." Morgan said, his voice raspy. He needed the money. His rent was due. "Good. It's a white glove delivery, high value. Take the van to Fifth Avenue. Drop off is at the Vance Foundation Charity Gala." Morgan froze. "The Vance Foundation?" "Yeah. Some charity auction items. Don't scratch the boxes. Get moving." Morgan walked to the van, his legs feeling like lead. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done punishing him. He had to deliver packages to his ex-wife's party, a party celebrating the wealth she had built after leaving him. He drove into Manhattan, the city lights blurring in the rain. He pulled up to the service entrance of the Plaza Hotel. It was the same hotel where he used to take Chloe for drinks. Now he was entering through the loading dock. He unloaded the boxes, stacking them onto a dolly. He pushed them through the service corridors, navigating the maze of the hotel's underbelly until he reached the freight elevator. He pressed the button for the ballroom level. When the doors opened, the noise hit him. The music, the laughter, the clinking of crystal. It was the sound of the world he used to own. He pushed the cart into the staging area behind the main ballroom. He was supposed to leave the boxes and go, but the curtains were slightly parted. He couldn't help himself. He peeked through. The ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland. White roses everywhere. An orchestra playing Waltz No. 2. And there in the center of the dance floor was Elysia. She was wearing silver. She looked older, yes, but stronger. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of wisdom, not weariness. She was dancing with a man, tall, kind-faced, with graying hair. He was looking at her as if she were the only person in the universe. He was whispering something to her, and she threw her head back and laughed, a genuine belly-deep laugh that Morgan realized he had never heard in 5 years of marriage. Morgan watched, mesmerized and horrified. "Hey, you!" A floor manager in a headset snapped his fingers at Morgan. "You, the delivery guy, leave the boxes and get lost. Guests are arriving. We don't want trash in the hallway." Trash? Morgan flinched. He looked back at Elysia one last time. She was happy. Truly, deeply happy. And she had achieved it all by removing him from the equation. He turned the cart around. "I'm going," Morgan muttered. Morgan drove the van back to New Jersey in silence. When he got back to his basement apartment, he felt a strange urge. He went to the closet and pulled out the old cardboard box, the one Elysia had sent him 2 years ago. He had sold most of the items inside for cash. The pottery mug was gone. The photo frame was sold for the silver. But there was one thing left at the bottom, an old USB drive. He had ignored it before, assuming it was just old tax documents or family photos he didn't want to see. But tonight, after seeing her laugh, he needed to know. He plugged the drive into his cheap laptop. There was only one file. It was a video file dated 1 week before he asked for the divorce. Morgan clicked play. The video opened. It was a webcam recording. Elysia was sitting at the kitchen island, the same island where the end began. She looked tired. She was wearing his old college sweatshirt. She looked into the camera and took a deep breath. "Hi, Morgan," the video Elysia said softly. "It's 2:00 a.m. You're not home yet. You said you were working, but I know you're not. I tracked the GPS on the car. You're at the Ritz." Morgan closed his eyes. "I'm recording this because I don't think I can say it to your face." Elysia continued, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I finished the beta version of Valkyrie tonight. It works. It really works. And my first thought wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the fame." She held up a piece of paper to the camera. It was a printout of code. "I named the core protocol the Sterling Protocol." I named it after you, because I did this for us. I wanted to build something big enough to secure our future so you wouldn't have to be so stressed, so you wouldn't have to look for happiness somewhere else." She paused, her voice breaking. "I was going to surprise you with it on our anniversary next week. I was going to give you 50% of the company. I just wanted you to be proud of me. I just wanted you to see me." She looked down at her hands. "But if you're seeing this video, it means I didn't give it to you. It means you left before I could. It means I had to rewrite the protocol and erase your name from the code." She looked directly into the lens, her eyes piercing through time and space to the man sitting in the basement. "I loved you, Morgan. I loved you enough to build an empire for you. But you never looked up from your phone long enough to notice. Goodbye." The screen went black. Morgan sat in the darkness of his basement. The silence was deafening. He had lost the billions, yes. He had lost the status. But that wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy was that he had been loved by a woman who could move mountains, and he had traded her for a girl who liked expensive purses. He had been the inspiration for a masterpiece, and because of his own blindness, he had become the villain in her biography. He closed the laptop. He lay down on his single mattress, pulling the thin blanket up to his chin. Outside, a truck rumbled past carrying goods optimized by the Vance Logistics Network. The world was moving efficiently, perfectly, silently. And Morgan Sterling was finally completely part of the noise. Wow. That brings us to the end of Morgan and Alicia's story. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the most valuable things in our lives are the ones sitting quietly right in front of us. Morgan chased the flash and the noise, thinking that was success, while Alicia was silently building an empire out of love for him until he gave her a reason to build it for herself. It really makes you wonder, how many of us are ignoring the Alicias in our lives while chasing something that doesn't matter? And do you think Morgan deserved his fate, or was the punishment of watching her success too harsh? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and the ultimate comeback, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.